Hi, my name's Phil. I like talking about politics, and in this video I'm going to discuss the way Boris Johnson spent Friday humiliating our country in front of the German Chancellor, pointed out how moronic his own Brexit deal is, and then exhibited a quite breathtaking level of disrespect to one of the flags he likes humping by literally walking all over it. But first, if you'd like to be notified of daily news and politics, please subscribe to the channel and click the bell notification icon. So, what's the buffoon been up to now, I hear you ask? Quite a lot. I mean, I mostly would like to talk about how Brexit is a really stupid idea and it's causing quite a lot of trouble. But because it's the weekend, I'm going to chill a bit, and instead of articulating it in my own words, I'm going to use the Prime Minister's. You know, the guy who told it was a brilliant deal a year ago and that people should vote him an ill-advised majority to enact it about a year and a half ago. But first, a matter of gross disrespect. There was a bit of a kerfuffle on Friday evening as Downing Street actually published this image. Now, there are a few things to take issue with this. A couple of minor ones first. Firstly, Boris Johnson said he would refuse to take the knee in solidarity with Black Lives Matter, not because he opposed the cause. Oh, no. Because he didn't believe in gesture politics, he said. The same guy who used a pie to promote Brexit and drove through a polystyrene wall to do likewise. Well, now he's had, at the cost of the taxpayer presumably, a huge flag of St George dumped onto the dirty Downing Street road surface, and then he's trampled all over it. What was the purpose of this, if not a gesture? The second minor point I have is that they couldn't even get it right. Very minor point, but it irked me. A corner is draped over the pavement. They clearly wanted the vertical cross aligned with the door of number 10, but they didn't think to measure the angle of the road. It's very off-putting lack of thought went into that. But then there are more serious points as well. This represents a serious offence against the country. England, in this case, he hasn't, as far as I'm aware, trampled over any other flags. Now, people took this to be Boris Johnson showing his true colours, literally, that he only cares about England, not the wider UK. In actual fact, it shows his utter contempt for England. I replied to someone on Twitter who pointed out, are you supposed to walk on a flag? No. Now, I was in the Scouts, whereupon it is stressed duty to Queen and country. I used to bear flags on various parades. So on St George's Day parade, I would have the Cross of St George. And I was told not to let it touch the ground or brush against anything dirty, really, with low-hanging trees. Make sure it didn't brush on the foliage, all the rest of it. Respect for the flag. You know, because it's not just a cloth, it does mean something, it's a symbol. Now, you look at other countries, you know, when you've got like protesters and when they want to protest against another country, what do? You know, they get that other country's flag. They might set fire to it. Or they... Do you remember that time when some Brexiteers tried to set fire to an EU flag and it wouldn't catch fire because of EU regulations? Anyway, but that's what protesters would do. They'd set fire to the flag. That's what we think of your country. Or they might just throw it onto the ground and stamp on it. This, you know, they're setting themselves out in defiance against that country. It's an act of defiance. Boris Johnson has done it to one of the flags of the UK that he is supposed to represent. Now, never mind just a Labour leader. If even the lowliest, most obscure Labour backbench MP had pulled a stunt like this, the right-wing press would be all over it. It would be front page news. Every paper. They would have been pointing out how disrespectful this is. They would have pointed out that the UK flag protocol, and you know, they would have showed how that Labour MP had literally trampled all over it. The disrespect to the country. But how did this actually go down? Most of the papers made no comment, at least on the front pages. The Times had it on the front page. They described it as showing support for England. So I do wish people would stop thinking of Boris Johnson as only looking out for the interests of England. He is only looking out for the interests of Boris Johnson. I also don't believe anyone with his background could be ignorant of the flag protocol. So it would not surprise me if he did this deliberately to test the boundaries yet again of what depraved acts the British public will let him get away with. But he wasn't content to treat one of the flags of the UK in the same manner as you might expect from a national enemy. He also humiliated himself, and by extension us, in his meeting with Angela Merkel. Boris Johnson said, and I quote, "It remains extraordinary that 20% of all the external checks conducted on the perimeter of the whole EU," he emphasised that, "take place in Northern Ireland." Yes, that is extraordinary. Many of us said well before Boris Johnson signed this agreement that it was extraordinary. And why is such a relatively high proportion of checks? You know, the EU has a large external border. Why is a fifth of them, the checks needed, taking place in one little part of the outer edge of the whole EU? Because everyone else who borders the EU took the view that having lower trade barriers where it met their interests with their most important market was what they should do. You know, there are trade barriers, of course, between the EU and any country outside of the EU. But we have deliberately taken a path to not only raise trade barriers with our most important market, but to raise them higher than any other country in Europe. Frankly, it might be argued that having only 20% of all external EU checks in Northern Ireland, maybe that's a potentially low figure. After all, we're not even applying all the checks yet. He also said that it was extraordinary that 30 drugs, including cancer drugs, can't be moved from Great Britain to Northern Ireland. Yeah, I agree. It is extraordinary that a British government and a British Parliament would allow barriers to the movement of vital medicines around the UK. Absolutely astounding. You know, what did we have when we were arguing against this? Brexiteers calling us traitors for arguing against that. And at this point, I'm well aware that this is me saying this. You may be just flicking to this part of the video for whatever reason and just thinking, oh, he's banging on about Brexit now, stop moaning. I'm quoting the Prime Minister because it's a bit jarring. The words that came out of Boris Johnson's mouth sound an awful lot like the words of a Remainer, don't they? And I can hear the gammons now. If they just saw what he was saying there, you know, they'd be complaining at that person. They'd be complaining at Boris Johnson if they didn't know who he was. Why is he pointing out all the flaws in our glorious Brexit? Why does he keep talking the country down? There he is saying how ridiculous Brexit is and how stupid we all were for voting for it. And then to finish the evening off, he went and trampled all over our flag. But he hadn't finished making Brexit sound stupid. He then went on to the topic of chilled meats. He implored us to imagine if bratwurst could not be moved from Dortmund to Dusseldorf. Yeah. Imagine a country being stupid enough not to allow the free passage of food and medicines around their own country. That's what our head of government seemed to be saying to another head of government. That being said, it was pointed out that such a situation actually does technically exist in Germany. Bussingen, never heard of it myself, but apparently, so this is German, it's German territory, but it's in the Swiss customs territory. That is to say, it's a small bit of German land that's completely surrounded by Swiss territory. So there's no way of getting stuff between it and other parts of Germany without going through Switzerland, which of course has a different customs rules and a different customs area. Knowledgeable people can enlighten me here. I suspect someone got very, very drunk and careless when working out some post-war treaty at some point in the past before the EU basically prevented war between the major powers of Europe. But Switzerland has a fair amount of access to the single market, but it's not in a customs union with the EU. So there are checks on goods passing between the two. So the situation does actually exist. He says, oh, imagine if you couldn't, transport bratwurst from one part of the EU to another. Well, or one part of Germany to the other, in fact. Either way, it actually exists. Might not be between Dusseldorf and Dortmund, but between one part of Germany and another. And I saw someone point out that Boris Johnson was having a Raab on Dover moment. For those who don't know, this is when Dominic Raab, who was at the time in the middle of a very, very short stint as Theresa May's Brexit secretary, said that he'd just discovered that Dover is actually really rather important for our trade. But I don't think this was an equivalent moment, because on that occasion, Raab came to an epiphany. He learned something. Always a proud moment in any Briton's life when they find out we live on an island. Of course, for most of us, it happens before we reach our 40s. But Johnson was making these statements as if he still didn't seem to understand them. Like he couldn't make the link between whack-eyed trade barriers and more customs checks. Like he couldn't make the link between being a third country and having to follow all the third country rules. There was no epiphany. There's no revelation, just painful humiliation. And yes, the British media will cover for him. But around the world, any foreign media that can be bothered to report on this would be doing so in a way that makes the UK look utterly ridiculous. How could they not? Even with a charitable outlook, how could they not? It would not be in the interests of any other national media to put lipstick on this pig of a performance. Of course, then he went on to say that we're going to have to sort it out, and we will sort it out. I mean, the details were a little bit lighter there, sadly. Sort what out? What's the specific problem that needs sorting out? You might think it's obvious. It's not at all obvious. Is the problem that we can't move certain goods from Britain to Northern Ireland? Well, that's because Boris Johnson insisted on different customs rules between Britain and Northern Ireland. So if the problem is the passage of certain goods from Britain to Northern Ireland, his red lines allow no solution. The solution to that problem of being a third country is to not be a third country. The solution to the problem of having a deal that doesn't allow us to trade freely is to have a free trade agreement. It's really not difficult. June was the month when Brexit Minister David Frost went to great lengths to point out how crap his Brexit deals were and how little he knew about the EU. Something he's still doing, something I may need to talk about again this week. Maybe July is the month where Boris Johnson feels it politically advantageous to admit that he was equally clueless and, more than that, still is. But those are my thoughts. Let me know yours in the comments below. Hope you found the video interesting. If you did, don't forget to click the like button. And if you'd like to support the channel further, please also click the Patreon link for details. And until next time, I'll see you later.